Recording?
I can.
All right, awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Chingir. I'm a workforce specialist at JVS Toronto. My job is to help employers to hire, and we do it for free because we have government funding. So that's my kind of short elevator pitch. And today, I'm very, very happy to have Malerie finally on our little show. Malerie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. How are you coping these days with all the stuff that's going on?
Trying to stay positive. I think just staying in touch with people and, staying connected with my colleagues and everything has helped a lot, especially with all the ways we can virtually connect now.
Awesome. Could you please share more about yourself? What do you do?
So I'm Mallory. I'm newer to the Toronto area. And I actually moved here because I got a promotion with my current company. So I've been with Swoon for a couple of years, and they asked me to come up to Canada to help lead our market here. So I love Toronto so far. I'm very excited to be here. And so I'm excited to get closer to the community here and learn more about people.
Awesome. Maybe a couple of words about your company and what do you do?
So we work with different organizations throughout the Greater Toronto Area, actually across Canada. We support companies whenever they have hiring needs. So whether that be contract to hire, or direct hire. So we support any kind of staffing solutions across various industries. So it doesn't we don't necessarily work within one particular industry, but we do support companies in a lot of different ways, and we work with candidates in the market who are looking for opportunities to try to find that right match.
Okay, awesome. So maybe a little bit about your journey. How did you find yourself in the role? Not everyone is always dreaming to become a recruiter.
I know, right? It's actually kind of an interesting story. So many years ago when I was in college, I was living in the States, and I was probably halfway through college, and my dad actually he had lost his job, and so he gave me a call one day, and he said, "Hey, the only way you can stay at Ohio State University, which is where I was studying, was if you pay for your own tuition." He's like, "Otherwise, you can move to Arizona, and I'll pay for your tuition." And I was like, "Huh, well." I think I'm gonna just pay for my own tuition. And so I decided to stay in Ohio, but the only way you could qualify as an in-state student to lessen your tuition cost was if you could prove that you were independent and that your salary could cover the cost of the tuition. So
Okay.
I ended up just landing a job in the staffing industry. Somebody gave me a chance, and I was working 40 hours a week, going to school at night. And that's kind of how I got my start in staffing. And I kind of fell in love with it, stepped away from staffing, and then decided I want to get back into it. And now I'm at Swoon, which I love. I was actually at another company where I had met my boss, and she came to Swoon. And yeah, the rest is history. Now I'm here and I'm loving it. And I got a chance to come to Canada, which is even more exciting. So yeah.
Oh, interesting. All right. So what is your role exactly? What is your normal day like? What are your duties? What do you do there?
Yeah, every day is crazy and different, which kind of keeps it fun, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm leading the market here, sales is a big part of my role, right? We're trying to grow, we're trying to meet more people, get more integrated into the community here. So I'm always reaching out to businesses, different hiring managers, trying to see who might need our help, whether that's now. It could be down the line. Maybe they don't have a need right now, but they know in 3, 6, 9 months they might have initiatives to work with me. And then I'm also helping our recruiting team too. So I'm helping them as soon as we get new roles in or new projects. I'm helping them reach out to candidates or helping to source new candidates that maybe we know will have roles for in the future. So it's a kind of mixed bag of everything, and then also leading the operations
Mhm.
up here too to make sure that we're doing our best to stay profitable, build and continue to grow here.
Interesting. So it's a very, very diverse role. You're still involved heavily in operations, but you're still also kind of hands-on very much.
I love being hands-on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my favorite part. I don't think I could just solely oversee. I love having conversations in the day to day, learning about what people are doing. I probably learn more throughout a day of conversations than anything else. So yeah, it's fun to be hands-on with the team.
So how do you do this? How do you scout? How do you find your candidates?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say it's constantly evolving. I think the last couple of years we've been in this candidates market where candidates have definitely had kind of the upper hand. They've been, unemployment was lower. They were able to kind of dictate the types of roles they were taking and salaries. And so they definitely had an advantage. So I think that makes it challenging for recruiters because you're constantly having to figure out like what are the best opportunities, how can I get somebody to come to this organization, how can I sell this organization, what are the benefits and perks. So we do search proactively for candidates. We use LinkedIn quite a bit. We post on job boards. We also look for resumes on job boards too that people have recently posted, go to networking events. We work a lot off referrals too. A lot of our candidates that we've placed in positions or our current contractors, they'll refer people to us. So it's kind of a mixed bag of everything for us to find the right people for the roles that we get.
Mm-hmm. All right. No, yeah, I usually kind of break down into like 3 different sections, like resume, interview, and LinkedIn. So first, like resume, what are your do's and don'ts? There are normally things that are kind of really popping out.
Yeah, I mean, for resumes, it's funny because you see everything. So I'm always looking for, is somebody very organized and in a concise way? Can they sort of share what they've done at each role? I am like the spelling and grammar police. So I'm always looking like, do they actually review this? Or do they just quickly throw it together? I always feel like it is the one thing that's representing you. So in a quick way, can you share what types of projects you worked on? What were your biggest accomplishments? I think accomplishments are always a cool thing to read about. I think a lot of people forget about adding those. They always just kind of want to bullet point out what their job duties were. But I think accomplishments kind of tell the story about somebody and how they contributed to the company overall. And I think too, technologies, summaries are great, but I think it should come off very genuine. What is it you're really looking for? How can you connect with your audience? So where are you applying? The types of companies. You might word it differently depending on the types of roles. So I think those are some of the key things that I look for.
All right. Is it important for a resume to be visually appealing? If you're not a graphic designer, I would say like usually not. What is your take on this?
Yeah, I don't think so necessarily. I mean, my own resume, I don't think it's like, a wow factor of creativeness or anything like that. I think if you're in the creative world, yeah, it helps to add like a nice touch of color or something. But when I'm looking for a developer, I'm not expecting them to come out with like the most creative resume. I mean, my goal is just see, do they have the skills? But I think it's just your own personal take on it. If you want to share some personality and showcase some of that creativeness, then go for it.
Okay. What's your take on cover letters? Do recruiters and hiring managers actually read them?
Gosh, I always feel like I'm the worst person to ask that question to because I think cover letters are tough because they're so long sometimes, and I think people don't have time to read them, and most of the time they're just going straight to the resume. I find that the best use of a cover letter is when that role is like the job you want. Like if you had to pick one job and you couldn't apply to any other jobs in the world, and that was the job you wanted, you would write a cover letter because it's the right fit. You check the boxes. You want to share maybe a personal connection with why you want to work at that company. I think they're good in those cases and that you're targeting them to someone specific, not just necessarily someone in HR, but maybe you find somebody that is connected with the company and you want to share it with them. I think in some cases that's helpful. I will say if they ask for a cover letter, always write one. Because I feel like sometimes it's kind of old school and some people are a little bit more old school about hiring. And so if they're asking for one, there's a reason. So always have someone else read your cover letter too.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And okay, and for like probably don'ts, what are kind of maybe you have some personal experiences, personal stories to share? Like what are the things candidates do that like tells you right away, oh, I can't work with this person?
Oh man. Yeah, I would say if their resume is kind of if they put so much on their resume that I'm like, oh my gosh, like it would take me like a day to even read through this. I think sometimes it's really hard because you know that they're a skilled individual and you kind of have to like set time aside to read through their resume. Sometimes I have to push it aside to look at others. I would say if you can be concise, great. Um, Pictures on your resume, I would say it's okay if it makes sense for the style of resume you
Yeah.
have, but also like kind of what you figure out the picture you use, make sure it's professional and that it makes it, obviously comes from maybe a headshot or something like that. Think, gosh, I've seen so many crazy resumes in my days. I think don't write in first person all of it. Like don't write out like I did this. Or I think sometimes creatives can get away with that and it
Hmm.
makes sense. But I think if your resume, it should be written in like third person or, something like that where or second, person.
Hmm. Probably last question, resume. I got ask it everyone. Like, what is an average amount of time you spend on a resume? Like, everyone tells me different numbers, like from 6 seconds to 40 seconds. Like because
Yeah.
there's so, yeah. How do you do that?
Uh 30 to 45
30,
seconds
30 to
initially.
45. That's an
Yeah.
average for everyone. Yeah.
And if I like somebody, like if I'm like, wow, in those 30 seconds, I'm like, okay, I like this candidate, then I'm going to sit down and look at it longer, right? That's what I think it takes 30 seconds to get somebody's like first impression or attention. And then it kind of goes from there.
I want to look into the thought process. Like you scan 30 seconds and then like, okay, I want to do it again and sit down, or you put it aside and then you return to it.
No, I normally dig into it at that moment.
All
I
right.
get
Okay.
excited. Yeah, I get jazzed up with resumes. So I'm always like, wow, this candidate looks awesome. Love their experience. I'll reach out to them right away, normally at that point, and send them a quick message, try to line something up for us to chat. So yeah, I kind of jump on things right away when I see somebody I like.
So the logical question would be: you find the resume, you have the resume, you see the name. Like the first thing you do you Google it up or
I
you
don't
LinkedIn,
actually.
right?
No. I don't tend to do
You
that. I
call them.
tend to I will call them. If they have an email, I'll shoot over an email and just try to schedule a time. It just depends. But I think even circling back to your last question, I think the time spent on resume, I
Yeah.
think know your audience as a candidate. So I think if you know kind of the role you're applying for and elevate your resume, make sure you're sharing the strengths that apply to the role because that's what's going to get someone's attention. If you just send the same resume to everyone, sometimes that's hard because it's not really targeted to the type of role you're applying for. And I think we all tend to apply for a couple versions of the type of job we're looking for. So I think that's always helpful too, is know the audience you're applying for.
Awesome. All right. So it's kind of a smooth transition right now to the telephone interview. You got the person on the call.
Yeah.
What are the questions you ask? Like you really kind of probing the candidate.
Yeah, I always love saying, tell me about yourself. I think that that's always like a really key indicator whenever they start to go on a tangent, which
Yeah.
direction they go on. And it's always interesting because I like to dig into their background. I think most of my interviews are very conversational. I think they flow. I'm really just trying to learn. What were their major accomplishments? I kind of mentioned that with the resumes. What were some of the projects that they worked on that they were either like most proud of or they liked doing the most? And then I always like to ask people, I think some people forget to ask, like, what kind of job do you want to do? Like, what do you like the most out of all of your jobs you've had? What did you like the most? And like, maybe what was something that you did that you were like, I don't ever want to do that again.
Mhm.
Just kind of filtering out because like we work with a staffing, for a staffing company. It's always good for us to kind of understand the diversity of what people like to do, what they want to do, because who knows, we might get several different jobs that could be of
Yeah.
interest to them. But that's kind of what my key questions are during an interview. I try not to trick people or throw them off in any way. My goal is to try to get like a very clear understanding, have a very genuine conversation, get to know them well.
Hmm.
If there's any obstacles in the way that may, trouble them from maybe commuting to a certain location, or maybe they can only work remote, like just trying to figure out those nuances so I can make the best match for them.
Hmm. Okay. So, but not looking only into the information that they give you, but also in kind of voice and demeanor and how like kind of decorum of how they hold themselves. Do
Yeah,
you
I
think you
will
pay
say
attention to that?
100%. I will say my biggest pet peeve during an interview is when somebody has a huge ego. I think we've all been through those interviews where you're like, there's a way to present your accomplishments, and
Yeah.
then there's somebody who just has an ego and they've got a chip on their shoulder. And that's my biggest turnoff during an interview. And honestly, typically, if people have too much of an ego, I know our clients don't want that either. And a lot of times, I won't necessarily be able to present them unless it makes real like a lot of sense for a certain opportunity. I think the ego thing gets in the way sometimes.
I think it's like kind of two elements to it, right? It's an objective one. First of all, it's harder to present them, and secondly, as a person, you kind of don't want to do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, my reputation's on the line too at the end of the day. So if they're like,
Absolutely.
really, this is the person you thought would be a fit here. But I think it's a learning experience. I always like to coach candidates during interviews too and
Hmm.
just say, hey, is this how you typically interview? Or is it just maybe because you're interviewing with me and I'm a recruiter that you're being a little bit overly over the top, because sometimes they'll say like, yeah, I just wanted to share that with you, and I'll say, okay, like just make sure when you're interviewing, here's just some bits of advice. So I do try to help them, like if there's something I notice that maybe they're overcompensating or they're really lengthy in their responses, I'll try to help them. Here's how a better way you might be able to tell that same story in a more concise way. So I do try to coach them too so that they can find a job, whether it's through me or someone else.
All right. Okay. So after the telephone interview, the in-person interview follows, or you forward the profile?
No, so we do a phone interview and then we do a Skype or a video interview
Okay.
after. A lot of our candidates, it's hard to get around during the day to be able to meet in person. So if they're around our office building, which is in the financial district, and they're close by, we'll meet them sometimes for coffee or at the office. But most of the time, it's a phone interview and then we follow with that Skype. And
Mhm.
sometimes the Skype interview is even with maybe somebody on our sales team who knows the client really well and they just want to get a better sense of if they're the right culture fit or the right have the right skill set for that particular client. So it varies. We don't always have the person interview with the same person within our organization.
I hear this all the time. Maybe you could elaborate kind of your perspective from that. What is the culture fit? And because there are many things that kind of the word culture fit is masking.
Yeah.
So maybe you could talk about this more.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's what I always dig into with my clients too. They'll say they need to be a good culture fit. And I'm like, well, what does that mean to you? How do you decipher what a good culture fit is? I think for us, the more we work with a client, the
Hmm.
more we know, we learn, and we figure it out because the candidates they pass on seem to have things in common, or if we prove that we've placed maybe 10, 15 people, we kind of understand like, okay, they like people that maybe have previously worked there,
Hmm.
or they like people that have a more outgoing personality. They like people who have a strong work ethic. And I think with that, a lot of times what I'm looking for is during my screening, did they say that they're open to learning or they like to
Hmm.
learn? I think that that's like really key in a lot of people's cultures. But I do know every company has their own culture fit. I think if there's a culture that maybe they like to party a lot and hang out a lot, and in the work environment's very open, like that might not be the right culture fit for a candidate of ours. Maybe that's not what they're looking for. So we try to dive into all that to see like what is like the environment like, what are the people like, is this going to be a good match? Because I think we're also all looking for diversity too, right? We don't want the same people from the same backgrounds in the same room because that's not going to help any company grow. So I think the more diverse we can be too is always helpful. And we try to see how does a company want to be diverse and what does that look like to them?
It's actually, yeah, actually a very good comment. I want to like really hear your opinion because many people say like, hey, there are so many companies that are not welcoming newcomers, but I'm saying not on the opposite side, like companies, they understand that hiring a newcomer makes a lot of business sense. Like newcomers are hungry and they're willing to learn and they're already adaptable, they're already resilient because they've been through this grind of immigration. What do you see like working with your employers?
Yeah, well, I think it's unique because now that I'm new to Canada too, I can really relate to people that are new to Canada and have gone through that whole immigration process because it's
Yeah.
definitely challenging. It's not an easy thing to go through. And I do think that I think certain companies are open-minded. I hate to throw a blanket statement out and say everybody is because I think there are companies that maybe aren't as open-minded. It's just, I think, targeting and figuring out where are the diverse companies here in the marketplace? I think we see, there's a lot of awards that have been given to companies that are more diverse and more open-minded to how they hire, and more inclusive. So I think if you start there, maybe look like, what are the top 50 companies that we know are inclusive? Is there opportunity within that organization? I think those are sometimes really good places to start. And then in addition, I think startups too can be very open-minded to newcomers, right? I think that they want diversity amongst their group. I think it's great to get different perspectives. So I think it just varies across the board.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much. A couple of questions about LinkedIn. I know, because we're talking with you for a long time, you're super responsive, super friendly, but what is the best way to work with a recruiter on LinkedIn? And what is the best, how would you like to be approached?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I have to say the same thing about you, right? Because we were talking back and forth on LinkedIn. It was just it was very quick and new, but I felt so connected with you right away. I was like, oh man, this is somebody who I want to stay in touch with. So kudos to you, because I think you have a great presence online.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that here's what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't just reach out to everybody. I wouldn't just start to use the same message and copy and paste it to everybody. I think that LinkedIn is, there's a lot of noise on LinkedIn. I think we're starting to learn that. I think, 10 years ago on LinkedIn, it was a very different platform. You could get to where you needed to be a lot quicker. I think right now there's a lot of accessibility to people, but there's also a lot of noise. So I think when you can customize your message, when you can really have a purpose of why you're reaching out to somebody and find maybe something to connect with them on, I think that's always helpful. I think if you're just reaching out to everybody in kind of a mode of desperation, it's almost going to work against you. I think less is more sometimes. The more targeted you are, the more specific in your messaging, the more ways that you can relate to somebody. I think that's where you're going to find the most results, especially on LinkedIn.
Okay. Having in mind of a recruiter, what would be your notes with the invitation of connecting to the recruiter?
Yeah, I think that if you are reaching out to me, because I do get reached out to a lot, and there's people I respond to, and I would say I respond to about 90% of people. I think that I can tell when someone's being genuine, and I always like when somebody just is straight up with me and transparent. Like, hey, I saw that you're hiring. I saw your post. It really caught my attention. I'm a graphic designer here in the market. I would love to get to know more about what you're looking for to see if there's a match for me, maybe now or down the line. I think that that's always helpful, is when candidates want to build that connection for long term and not just for that one specific thing. I think when I see that, and I have a lot of candidates that stay in touch with me, maybe we don't have a job for them right now, but they follow up with me in a few weeks or a few months down the line and say, hey, just wanted to check in with you, see if you had anything. I think that's great, because whether they're doing that with me or 100 people, it's still nice to hear from them. And I think it still keeps them top of mind for me too, as I'm getting jobs in as well.
Yeah, I think the takeaway message here is you need to make it personal. You need to care, you need to connect with the person, and then this is why I'm saying always, you need to be always oriented into what can you give, not what can you get, because this mindset, it becomes very clear right away that you're just only for this kind of short-term benefits, and it always repels the person.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I also think too, you don't always have to include your resume on that first touch point. I think you can reach out and then maybe follow up again with the resume. I think if you reach out from a very genuine perspective, and maybe you don't include the resume, but just say, hey, I'd love to share my resume if that's something you'd be interested in. Most of the time, somebody's going to reply and say, yeah, I'd love to see your resume. So I think that's also kind of nice, because it helps create that back and forth, engagement.
Mm-hmm. So the question that formed in my mind, considering the current environment, the situation, what's going on right now, if you are, for example, just a thought experiment, happen to become a job seeker right now, what would be your first steps, your strategy on how to kind of get employment again?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll give the advice that I always tell my family when they're looking for jobs. My sister's
Yeah.
out of a job right now, so I've been helping to coach her. And I've done this myself, when I was out of work. I think the first thing is reach out to your network. Whether or not you've talked to somebody maybe in the last few months, the last few years, I think the natural instinct for people is that most people want to help. And I think if you do reach out to your personal network, whether it's your family or your friends or maybe an acquaintance that you met one time and you talked to a few times and you connected enough that you feel like you might be able to follow up, I think just reach out to everyone and let them know, like, hey, I'm out of work right now. Do you know if your company's hiring or maybe somebody else in your network? I
Hmm.
think, I mean, I will be honest, that's how I've landed almost every job I've had, was just by reaching out to people and saying, hey, who do you know, versus applying online. So I definitely think that would probably be my first piece of advice. And then don't be so hard on yourself. I think we can all easily be hard on ourselves or start to get demotivated or start to feel less positive because, it is a grind to apply for jobs, right? It's almost like a full-time job going out there and, feeling defeated sometimes, right? I'd say don't always feel defeated because you don't get a job. It means there's probably a better one out there waiting for you. It just means maybe that wasn't the right timing for you or that wasn't the right opportunity. So I think the more positive you can stay, and it's easy to say, it's harder to do. I think sometimes we just have to check ourselves and say, okay, I'm going to get up today and I'm going to make it a great day and I'm going to apply for jobs. And I know yesterday was not that great, but today is going to be better. And I think sometimes we just need to kind of give ourselves a pep talk or ask our spouse or our family members to give ourselves a pep talk. So I think that's probably my best advice.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you very much. Um, Also, I had a question about like you kind of having your hand on the pulse of what's going on with the businesses right now. What are the trends that you see, and what are your projections on when are we going back offline?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wish I knew all the answers, right? I think it's interesting because I mean, none of us have ever been through something like
Mhm.
this. So it's unique because I think some of us where we feel like, oh yeah, if this was a recession, I would know what to do.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's like it's a pandemic and there's a lot going on. I think it's impacting all of us so differently. And we're trying to be compassionate and also trying to figure out like how this is going to change in the long term.
Mhm.
I was just talking with my colleagues this morning and I was like, hey, I think May is going to be a much different month. I think April and March, it kind of all hit us all differently, but at the same time, I think um, we all find kind of solace in the fact that like this is all happening to all of us. We just have to figure out a way to make it. But I do think that April was kind of a learning curve of a month. How do we all
Yeah.
work remote? How do I get my organization set up remote? Is this going to be a new normal for like a long time or like, we don't really know. So I was telling them this morning, I said, I think May is going to present a lot more opportunities for us because now everyone's kind of getting settled in. They've got the equipment they need to work remote. They're a little bit more acclimated to homeschooling their kids and working at the same time, which is not easy. And it's funny because right when I said that, like an hour later, we got new roles that came in. And
Mhm.
I was like, you know what? I think this is the start. The floodgates might start to open where we see companies start to establish like what are their priorities, their initiatives, kick off May, and then we'll see what happens. But I think it's hard for us to all tell um, as we go through this. It's tough, but I do see there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We just need to figure out when we're going to get there.
Yeah, I think it's important for all job seekers out there to hear this, like to understand that we, like workforce specialists and recruiters, we do not like hold any jobs like in our reserves. Everything that is out there, all our resources, they're all online. Please reach out, feel free. And it kind of brings me to naturally to what kind of positions you have available. What do you think will be coming up? What kind of industries for you are you hiring?
Yeah, great question. So, we work a lot with banking and financial industry, as you can imagine, being in Toronto. It's like
Yeah.
the biggest industry here. I do see that picking up some steam. Telecom, healthcare, I think those are really big industries right now. And I do see that trend continuing. I think retail's probably going to hurt. Travel and hospitality is probably going to hurt for a while. But that's going to eventually come back though, right? It's all going to eventually make a turn like it always does. So I think it's just a matter of kind of keeping our eyes peeled to see when that happens, whether it's this year or early next year with some of those industries. Yeah, the second we have a job, we're out there. We're posting it. We're looking for people. So I always encourage candidates if they want to engage with us sooner so that they're the first person I can call. Because right, that's how it works. Like if I talk to someone, if they're in our pipeline, I'm going to call them first. I think if they want to engage with us, please do, right? We want to make sure that we have any information we can to call you about the second we get a job. So we always want to help.
Awesome. Okay. So, any current openings right now that you have available?
We do. We've got some bilingual help desk roles open. So if anybody is interested in those types of roles, I do feel like we've got some things coming on the pipeline too for developer, software engineer. Both like pretty much Java focused for those. And then I do feel like we might be getting some accounting roles down the pipeline too. So we've been having a lot of conversations with clients out there, and all that I need them to do is pull the trigger and we're ready to go to help them. So if anybody's interested in those roles, definitely reach out to us.
There you go. Malerie is hiring. Please feel free to connect. As she mentioned, 90% response rate.
Yeah.
She's super open. And yeah, last thing probably, what would you like your message to our audience? What would you say like in the end?
Yeah, probably a summary of everything, right? I mean, you've been awesome, by the way. Great host, great questions too. I would say stay positive. We're all in this together, and we're going to come out, stronger than ever. So, if you need help, we're here for you. There's a lot of other people out there that want to help too. So definitely keep your options open, work with different people. I think that's the best way to find what you want. And, I wish everybody that is part of your audience the best, and, that they find something that they really love.
Absolutely. I'm going to echo here, Malerie. Thank you very much for joining us. And I'm going to say, yes, I'm a workforce specialist at JVS. We are here for you, whether you're a job seeker or a business. If you need any assistance, please reach out. We're going to do whatever we can. And Malerie, thank you. Thank you very much again. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. And yeah, I'm looking forward to future collabs.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Have a great day and a good week.
Take care.